I will leave behind nothing but scorched earth.
They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer mine scalding hot with a side of public humiliation. My name is Elliot Granger, and this is the story of how I turned my cheating wife's social circle into a smoking crater of embarrassment and financial ruin. It started with a toast that went horribly wrong, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Picture this: a beautiful October evening in Millbrook Harbor, Connecticut. Our historic colonial home gleaming under string lights I'd spent 3 hours hanging. The rooftop terrace of the yacht club overlooking the Sound, rented at my expense for what I thought would be a celebration of our marriage. Instead, it became the opening shot of World War III. I'm a home restoration contractor, the kind of guy who rebuilds Victorian mansions for people with more money than sense. My hands are calloused, my bank account is healthy, and my patience for entitled rich people had been wearing thin for months, especially when one of those entitled rich people happened to be my wife. Vivian Granger, nee Hartwell, was Instagram perfect in that artificial way that screams, "I've never worked a day in my life." Blonde highlights that cost more than most people's rent, a yoga body maintained by a personal trainer I also paid for, and a smile that could freeze champagne mid-pour. "Eli, darling, you need to move the appetizer table," she commanded, not asked, while adjusting her designer dress that probably cost more than my truck payment. "Skylar says it's blocking the view." Skylar Morrison was Vivian's best friend and the ringleader of their little mean girl clique. Married to an investment banker, she treated everyone like hired help. Standing next to her was Jade Patterson, the professional party planner who somehow never planned anything but always had opinions about everything. "Sure thing, honey," I said, biting back what I really wanted to say. Tonight was supposed to be special. I had plans, big plans. After 5 years of marriage, I was ready to take the next step. Kids. A real family. Something that mattered more than which restaurant had the best brunch for Instagram photos. The party was in full swing by 8 o'clock. Vivian's social circle had descended like well-dressed locusts, drinking my champagne and eating my catered shrimp while gossiping about people who weren't there to defend themselves. I recognized the type: old money families who'd been living off trust funds for 3 generations, plus the newer money trying desperately to fit in. I'd been watching Chase Devlin all evening. 28 years old, trust fund baby, drove a red Maserati that he parked across 2 spaces to avoid door dings. He called himself an artist, but the only thing he'd ever created was debt. What bothered me wasn't his pretentious man bun or his habit of name-dropping galleries in Manhattan. It was the way he looked at my wife, and the way she looked back. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, tapping my champagne flute with a butter knife. The crowd quieted, turning toward me with that polite attention rich people give to entertainment they're not paying for directly. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Vivian and me. 5 years ago, I married the most beautiful woman in Connecticut." Polite applause. Vivian beamed, thinking she knew where this was going. "Tonight, I want to talk about the future, about taking our relationship to the next level, about starting a family." The smile froze on Vivian's face like a Windows computer encountering an error message. "So I'd like to propose a toast," I continued, raising my glass. "To new beginnings, to children, and to—" "Oh my God, Eli, stop!" Vivian's voice cut through my speech like a chainsaw through silk. "Just stop!" The crowd went silent. You could hear the waves lapping against the dock 3 stories below. "Excuse me?" I said, still holding my champagne glass. Vivian laughed, that tinkling artificial sound she made when she was nervous or lying. "I mean, really, everyone. Look at him, standing there talking about babies like I'm some kind of incubator." Skylar giggled. Then Jade. Then the ripple of laughter spread through the crowd like a virus. "I won't ruin my figure for a man who can't even keep up with me," Vivian continued, warming to her audience. "I mean, when was the last time you were in a gym, darling? When was the last time you bought me something that didn't come from a hardware store?" The laughter got louder. My face burned, but not from embarrassment. From rage. Chase was smirking behind his craft beer. Skylar was practically cackling. Even people I'd considered friends were chuckling into their drinks. "You know what?" I said, setting down my champagne glass with deliberate care. "You're absolutely right, Vivian. I can't keep up with you. I work 60-hour weeks restoring beautiful old homes while you spend my money on yoga classes and lunch dates. I save for our future while you buy purses that cost more than most people make in a month. You're absolutely right. I can't keep up with that level of selfish stupidity." The laughter died like someone had unplugged a speaker. So here's my toast, I continued, raising my glass again. To freedom. To finally being done with pretentious leeches who mistake spending money for having class. To divorce. I drained the champagne in one gulp and set the glass down hard enough to crack the stem. Everyone out, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent terrace. Party's over. I paid for this venue and I'm closing it down. Eli, you can't just... Skylar started. Watch me. Security. The yacht club staff who'd been waiting in the wings stepped forward. They knew who signed the checks. But the party's supposed to go until midnight, Jade protested. Send me a bill, I said, along with everyone else who wants compensation for their wounded feelings. People started moving toward the exits, murmuring and shooting glances over their shoulders. Chase tried to approach Vivian, but I stepped between them. Not tonight, Picasso, I said. Find your own ride home. Vivian grabbed my arm as the last of the guests filed out. Eli, wait, it was just a joke. You know how I get when I'm nervous. I looked down at her manicured fingers on my work-roughened skin. No, Vivian, it wasn't a joke. It was the truth. And you know what? I'm grateful. You just saved me months of pretending this marriage was worth saving. I pulled my arm free and walked toward the exit, leaving her standing alone on the terrace in her expensive dress, holding a glass of champagne that suddenly tasted like ash. As I reached the elevator, I heard her call after me. Where are you going? I turned back one last time. To find a good divorce lawyer. Don't wait up. The elevator doors closed on her shocked face, and I allowed myself the first genuine smile I'd had in months. She thought she'd gotten the last word. She'd just signed her own social end warrant. The next morning, I woke up in my workshop behind the house. I'd spent the night there before during our fights, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the smell of wood stain and honest work. It beat sleeping next to a woman who'd just publicly humiliated me in front of half of Millbrook Harbor's social elite. My phone had 17 missed calls from Vivian and 43 text messages, ranging from apologies to threats to promises that we could work this out. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Instead, I made coffee and started doing what I do best, planning a renovation. Except this time, I wasn't rebuilding a house. I was rebuilding my life, and that meant tearing down everything Vivian had built hers on. First stop, my home office. 5 years of marriage had taught me to keep meticulous records. Vivian might have thought I was just a blue-collar contractor who got lucky, but I'd learned long ago that paperwork was power. I had copies of everything: bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns, investment accounts. What I found made my blood boil all over again. In the past 6 months, Vivian had spent $12,000 at something called Meridian Gallery. I'd never heard of it, but a quick Google search showed it was Chase Devlin's art studio. She'd been buying his paintings, terrible abstract pieces that looked like a toddler had attacked a canvas with finger paints. Then there were the restaurant charges, lunch at Le Bernardin in Manhattan, on a Tuesday when she'd told me she was having a spa day with the girls, dinner at 11 Madison Park, on a night when she'd claimed she was attending a charity auction, both meals for 2 people, both on our joint credit card. The Venmo transactions were even more interesting, monthly payments to something called Wellness Solutions that turned out to be a massage therapist who made house calls, specifically house calls to Chase's condo in New Haven. I was building a file folder when Mrs. Portis knocked on my door. Eleanor Portis was 73 years old, lived next door, and knew everything that happened in a 6-block radius. She also made the best apple pie in Connecticut and had never liked Vivian. "Eli, dear, I brought you some breakfast," she said, holding a covered plate. "I heard about last night." "News travels fast," I said, letting her into the kitchen. "Honey, half the yacht club was calling their friends before they even got to their cars. Vivian's little performance is all anyone's talking about." She set down the plate and gave me a motherly look. "I also thought you should know. I've seen that red sports car in your driveway 3 times this week. Always when you were at work." My jaw tightened. "What time?" "Tuesday around noon. Thursday at 10 in the morning. Yesterday around 2 o'clock. Each time Vivian came out about an hour later looking, well, like she'd been exercising." I thanked Mrs. Portis and walked her to the door, my mind racing. An hour each time, just long enough for what I was starting to suspect. My phone rang. Ruth Blackwood, my attorney. I'd called her at 6 in the morning and left a voicemail. "Eli, I got your message. How bad is it?" Ruth was 55, had been practicing family law for 25 years, and had a reputation for leaving opposing counsel bleeding on the courtroom floor. She'd handled my business incorporation and my mortgage, so she knew my financial situation. Bad enough that I want to make sure she doesn't get a penny more than the law requires, I said. Connecticut is a no-fault state, but that doesn't mean we can't make her life difficult. Do you have evidence of cheating? Working on it. Good. Document everything. Bank records, credit card statements, unusual expenses. If she's been using marital assets to fund an affair, we can argue for reimbursement. Also, change your passwords on everything. Today. Already done. Smart man. One more thing. Don't do anything stupid. I know you're angry, but attack charges won't help your case. After I hung up, I spent the next 2 hours changing passwords, closing joint credit cards, and moving money from our shared accounts into my business account. Perfectly legal, since I was the only one who'd ever deposited money into them anyway. By noon, Vivian's platinum card was declined at Whole Foods. By 2 o'clock, her gym membership was suspended for non-payment. By 4 o'clock, she was pounding on my workshop door. Eli, open this door right now. I opened it slowly, like I was greeting a door-to-door salesman selling something I didn't want. Hello, Vivian. How was your day? You know exactly how my day was. You cut off my credit cards. I closed our joint accounts. There's a difference. You're welcome to open your own accounts using your own money. Her face went through several interesting color changes. My own money? Eli, I don't have any money. Everything we have is joint. No, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Everything we have is mine. You've never worked a day since we got married. Every dollar in every account came from my business. But I'm your wife. For now. That's about to change. She tried to push past me into the workshop, but I blocked her path. This is my house, too. Actually, it's not. I bought this house 2 years before we met. Your name isn't on the deed. The look of dawning horror on her face was almost worth the 5 years of marriage. You can't just leave me with nothing. Watch me. Though I'm sure Chase will be happy to help out, I hear he's quite the artist. Maybe he can sell a painting or two. Her face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of our credit card statement. $12,000 at Meridian Gallery. Either you're a very dedicated art collector, or you've been buying your boyfriend's paintings to help him pay rent. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is whether you want to handle this quietly or whether you want me to make it public, because I've got a lot more evidence where that came from. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. Finally, she turned and walked away without another word. I watched her get into her BMW, which was still in my name, I realized, and drive off toward town, probably heading to Chase's place to figure out their next move. That was fine. I was 3 steps ahead of them already. I spent the evening at Murphy's Tavern, the kind of blue-collar bar where nobody cared about your Instagram followers or your trust fund. The owner, Frankie Murphy, had been my friend since high school. Heard you caused quite a scene at the yacht club, he said, sliding a beer across the bar. News really does travel fast in this town. Faster when it's good news. Half my customers have been waiting for someone to take Vivian and her crew down a peg. They come in here sometimes, slumming it for their social media. Always complaining about the music, the drinks, the people, like they're doing us a favor by spending money here. Well, they won't be spending much money anywhere for a while. Frankie grinned. I heard about the credit cards, nice touch, but you know they're not going to take this lying down, right? That crowd fights dirty. So do I. They just haven't seen it yet. As if summoned by our conversation, Chase Devlin walked through the door. He looked around the bar like he was entering a contaminated zone, his nose wrinkled in distaste. He spotted me and walked over, trying to project confidence, but failing badly. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't, I replied, not bothering to look at him. This is about Vivian. Vivian is my wife. You're nobody. Do the math. He grabbed my shoulder, trying to turn me around. Big mistake. I stood up slowly, all 6 feet and 200 pounds of me. Chase was tall but soft, the kind of guy who'd never been in a real fight in his life. Touch me again, I said quietly, and you'll be drinking your next craft beer through a straw. The bar had gone quiet. Frankie was watching with interest, his hand resting casually near the baseball bat he kept behind the register. Chase's hand dropped. Look, this doesn't have to get ugly. It's already ugly. You've been sleeping with my wife. In my house. Using money from my bank account? The only question now is how much uglier it's going to get. Vivian and I? We're in love. I laughed, loud enough to turn heads. Love? Kid, you're a walking trust fund with daddy issues. Vivian's a social climber with expensive tastes. You think that's love? That's just mutual parasitism. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted to play house with a married woman, and she wanted to trade up to someone with more money and fewer calluses. Except here's the thing. I looked into your finances. That trust fund you're so proud of, it's almost empty. Turns out art doesn't pay the bills, and cocaine isn't cheap. His face went pale. How did you... I know people. People who know other people. Your dealer's been talking about how you owe him money. Your landlord's been talking about eviction notices. Your gallery hasn't sold a painting in 8 months. I leaned closer. So, here's some free advice. Find a new sugar mama, because this one's about to be broke. Chase opened his mouth to respond, but Frankie cleared his throat loudly. I think it's time for you to leave, Frankie said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd bounced drunks for 20 years. Chase looked around the bar, realized he was outnumbered by about 15-1, and headed for the door. This isn't over, he called back. Yes, it is, I replied. You just don't know it yet. After he left, Frankie refilled my beer. You know he's going to run straight to Vivian and tell her everything you just said. I'm counting on it. Sometimes the best way to catch rats is to let them think they're cornering you. I finished my beer and headed home, already planning my next move. Vivian and Chase thought they were playing chess, but I was playing a completely different game. Tomorrow, things were going to get interesting. I woke up the next morning to find my front yard decorated with toilet paper and my mailbox spray painted with the word "rude person" in bright pink letters. Classy. Mrs. Portis was already outside with a cup of coffee, surveying the damage. Happened around 3 in the morning, she said. 2 cars, that red sports car and a white BMW. Took pictures with my phone. I looked at the photos on her phone. Clear shots of Chase's Maserati and Vivian's BMW, plus a decent image of Skylar Morrison climbing out of the passenger seat with a roll of toilet paper. Mind if I send these to myself? I asked. Already did. Check your email. God, I love that woman. I spent an hour cleaning up the mess, then drove to the police station. Officer Tom Marks was working the desk. We'd gone to high school together, though we'd never been friends. Eli Granger, he said without enthusiasm. Heard you've been making waves. Someone vandalized my property last night. I have photos of the perpetrators and their license plates. He looked at Mrs. Portis's pictures with professional interest. That's Chase Devlin's car, and isn't that your wife's BMW? Soon-to-be ex-wife. Can you do anything about it? I can file a report, but unless you want to press charges against your wife, this is going to be a he said, she said situation. What about the Morrison woman? Skylar? Her husband's got connections. This would be a misdemeanor at best, and she'd be out on bail in 2 hours with a lawyer that costs more per hour than I make in a week. I nodded. I'd expected as much. Just file the report. I want it on record. You got it. But Eli, be careful. That crowd plays dirty and they've got money and influence. Don't give them a reason to come after you legally. I left the police station with a copy of the incident report and a plan forming in my mind. If they wanted to play games, I'd show them what real games looked like. First stop, Meridian Gallery. Chase's art studio was in a converted warehouse in New Haven's Arts District, the kind of place where trust fund kids went to pretend they were starving artists while their parents paid their rent. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:30, Vivian's BMW pulled up. She got out wearing yoga pants and a designer jacket, looked around nervously, then hurried inside. She emerged an hour later looking disheveled, her hair messed up and her lipstick gone. I took pictures of everything. At 2 o'clock, I walked into the gallery like a potential customer. Chase was behind the desk, wearing paint-splattered jeans and a black t-shirt that probably cost more than most people's entire wardrobe. Can I help you? He asked, not recognizing me immediately. I'm interested in purchasing some art for my home renovation business, something that says success and sophistication. His eyes lit up. A potential sale. Well, you've come to the right place. I specialize in contemporary abstract expressionism with postmodern influences. Impressive. What kind of prices are we talking about? My smaller pieces start at $5,000. The larger works go up to $20,000. I walked around the gallery pretending to study his paintings. They were terrible. The kind of art that only sold because people were too embarrassed to admit they didn't understand it. "This one's interesting," I said, pointing to a canvas covered in red and black splotches. "What's it called?" "Passion's Destruction. It represents the death of love in modern society." "How prophetic. I'll take it." His face lit up like Christmas morning. "Excellent choice. That's 15,000. Perfect. I'll write you a check right now." I pulled out my checkbook and wrote a check for $15,000, making sure he could see my name as I signed it. "Eli Granger," he read aloud, and his face went white. "That's right, and this check is going to bounce higher than a rubber ball, just like your relationship with my wife." I tore up the check and let the pieces flutter to the floor. "But here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to stop seeing Vivian. You're going to stop taking her calls. You're going to disappear from her life completely." "And if I don't?" I smiled. "I'll make sure everyone in town knows that the trust fund artist can't pay his bills. I'll make sure your landlord knows you're 3 months behind on rent. I'll make sure your illegal substance dealer knows you've been talking to people about your business arrangement. You're threatening me. I'm educating you. There's a difference." I headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Chase, that painting really is terrible. You might want to consider a career change." I left him standing there holding the torn check, his face a mixture of rage and fear. Next stop, the yacht club. The Millbrook Harbor Yacht Club was old money central, the kind of place where membership was passed down through generations, and the waiting list was longer than most people's mortgages. I'd never been a member. Vivian had joined using her family connections, but I knew people who worked there. Danny Sullivan ran the marina. We'd done business before when I'd renovated his kitchen. "Eli, heard you caused quite a stir the other night." That's one way to put it. "Danny, I need a favor." "Name it." "Vivian's been bringing guests to the club, non-members. I'm pretty sure that's against the rules." Danny's expression grew serious. "It is. Members are responsible for their guests' behavior." "Why?" I showed him the photos from Mrs. Portis's phone. "Because one of those guests vandalized my property last night." "Jesus, Eli, I'm sorry." "Not your fault. But I thought the membership committee should know that Vivian's been sponsoring people who commit crimes." "I'll make sure they see this. The club takes its reputation very seriously. I appreciate it." As I was leaving, I ran into Margot Chen, another member of Vivian's social circle. Unlike Skylar and Jade, Margot had always been polite to me. She was married to a doctor and seemed less invested in the group's mean girl dynamics. "Eli," she said, looking uncomfortable, "I wanted to apologize for the other night. What Vivian did was cruel." "Thank you. That means a lot." She looked around to make sure no one was listening, then stepped closer. "There's something you should know. Vivian and Skylar have been planning something. I don't know what, but they've been having private conversations, and your name keeps coming up." "What kind of conversations?" "Something about teaching you a lesson, about making you pay for embarrassing them." She handed me a flash drive. "I recorded some of their calls. I thought you should hear what they're really saying about you." I took the drive, surprised. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've seen how they treat people they think are beneath them. I've seen how they treated you. And because my husband grew up poor and I know what it's like when people look down on you for working with your hands." She paused. "Also, because I never liked Vivian. She's mean and shallow, and you deserve better." That evening, I sat in my workshop listening to the recordings on the flash drive. What I heard made my blood boil. Vivian's voice. "He thinks he's so smart cutting off my credit cards." Well, two can play that game. Skylar's voice. "My husband knows people at the bank. We can make his life very difficult." Vivian. "I want him ruined. I want him to lose his business, his house, everything. By the time I'm done with him, he'll be begging me to take him back." Skylar. "What about Chase?" Vivian. "Chase is useful for now, but let's be honest, he's broke. I need someone with real money." Skylar. "There's always my cousin Bradley. He just got divorced, and his settlement was very generous." They went on like that for 20 minutes, planning my destruction while simultaneously planning Vivian's next relationship. It was like listening to sociopaths discuss their next sufferers. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I made copies of the recordings and sent them to Ruth Blackwood, along with all the financial evidence I'd gathered. Then I made a few phone calls. The first call was to my insurance agent, making sure my business and personal policies were up to date. The second call was to my accountant, asking him to audit all my business accounts and make sure everything was bulletproof. The third call was to a private investigator I'd used before when checking backgrounds on potential employees. Jack, it's Eli Granger. I need you to dig up everything you can on Chase Devlin and Skylar Morrison. Financial records, criminal history, personal relationships, everything. How deep do you want me to go? Deep enough to find the bodies. Give me a week. The fourth call was to my biggest client, Harold Whitman. He owned half the commercial real estate in 3 counties and had enough influence to buy and sell people like Skylar's husband. Harold, it's Eli. I need some advice about a legal matter. What kind of legal matter? I explained the situation, leaving out the more personal details, but focusing on the business threats. Eli, you've done excellent work for me over the years. If anyone tries to interfere with your business relationships, they'll have to go through me first. And trust me, they don't want to do that. By the time I went to bed that night, I had a team of professionals working on my behalf and the financial resources to weather whatever storm Vivian and her friends were planning. But more importantly, I had something they didn't: the moral high ground and the motivation that comes from being betrayed by someone you trusted. They wanted a war. They were about to get one. The next morning brought the first salvo in Vivian's counterattack. I woke up to find a process server at my door with papers for a restraining order. According to the filing, I had threatened and intimidated my wife and her friends, creating a climate of fear and emotional distress. The hearing was scheduled for that afternoon. I called Ruth immediately. "Don't panic," she said after I read her the papers. "This is a standard move. They're trying to paint you as the aggressor to gain advantage in the divorce proceedings. Do you have the recordings Margot gave you?" "Yes." "Bring them, and bring everything else you've documented. We're going to turn this around on them." The courthouse in Millbrook was a granite monument to justice that had been dispensing verdicts since 1847. I arrived 30 minutes early, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Vivian was already there with her attorney, a shark named Richard Pemberton who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. She'd also brought Skylar and Jade as witnesses, both dressed like they were attending a funeral. Judge Patricia Hendricks was 65 years old and had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense from either side. She reviewed the restraining order petition with the expression of someone reading a grocery list. "Mr. Pemberton, your client alleges that Mr. Granger has engaged in threatening behavior. What evidence do you have to support this claim?" Pemberton stood up, all confidence and expensive cologne. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to a campaign of financial and emotional mistreat. Mr. Granger has cut off her access to marital assets, made threatening statements to her friends, and engaged in stalking behavior." "Stalking behavior?" "He followed her to a private gallery and made threatening statements to her companion." Judge Hendricks looked at me. "Mr. Granger, how do you respond?" Ruth stood up. "Your Honor, Mr. Granger has done nothing more than protect his own financial interests and document his wife's cheating. We have evidence that Mrs. Granger has been conducting an affair and using marital assets to support her paramour." "That's a serious allegation, Miss Blackwood. Do you have proof?" "We do, Your Honor. Bank records, photographs, and audio recordings that demonstrate not only Mrs. Granger's infidelity, but also her plans to make false accusations against my client." Pemberton objected, but Judge Hendricks overruled him. Ruth played excerpts from the recordings, including the conversation where Vivian and Skylar discussed making his life very difficult and ruining him. The judge's expression grew stern as she listened. "Mrs. Granger," she said when the recordings finished, "these recordings suggest that you and your associates have been planning to make false accusations against your husband. How do you respond?" Vivian looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Those recordings were taken without my consent. They're illegal." "Connecticut is a one-party consent state, Mrs. Granger. The recordings are perfectly legal." Judge Hendricks reviewed the financial documents Ruth had submitted. "I also see evidence of significant expenditures on what appears to be gifts for someone other than your husband." "Your Honor," Pemberton interjected, "my client's personal relationships are not relevant to the question of whether she needs protection from her husband's threatening behavior." "On the contrary, Mr. Pemberton, they're very relevant when those relationships appear to be the motivation for making false accusations." Judge Hendricks looked directly at Vivian. "Mrs. Granger, I find no credible evidence that your husband has threatened you or engaged in stalking behavior. What I do find is evidence that you've been conducting an extramarital affair and planning to make false accusations to gain advantage in divorce proceedings." She banged her gavel. "The petition for a restraining order is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering both parties to refrain from making any public statements about this case or each other. Mrs. Granger, if you attempt to file any more frivolous motions in my courtroom, I'll hold you in contempt." Outside the courthouse, Vivian was in full meltdown mode. Skylar was trying to calm her down while Jade looked around nervously, probably worried about being dragged into legal proceedings. "This isn't over," Pemberton said to Ruth as they passed each other on the steps. "You're right," Ruth replied. "It's just getting started." That evening, I was back at Murphy's Tavern, celebrating my legal victory with Frankie and a few of the regulars. The mood was light until Chase Devlin walked in, this time with backup. Two guys who looked like they spent their days at the gym and their nights collecting debts. The bar went quiet. "We need to talk," Chase said, approaching my table. "No, we don't," I replied, not bothering to look up from my beer. One of his friends, a thick-necked guy with prison tattoos, stepped closer. "My friend here says you've been causing him problems." Frankie appeared at my shoulder, baseball bat in hand. "Gentlemen, I think you're in the wrong place." "This is between us and him," Thickneck said. "No," said a voice from the back of the bar. "It's between you and all of us." I turned to see Harold Whitman standing up from a corner booth, along with 6 other men I recognized as local contractors and business owners. Harold was 70 years old, but he still carried himself like the Marine sergeant he'd been in Vietnam. "Eli's done work for every man in this room," Harold continued, walking slowly toward Chase's group. "Good. Honest work at fair prices. You boys, on the other hand, are strangers here, and you're not welcome." Chase's backup suddenly looked a lot less confident. They were tough guys, but they were outnumbered 3-to-1 by men who'd spent their lives doing physical work and weren't impressed by gym muscles. "This is a private matter," Chase said, his voice cracking slightly. "Not anymore," Harold replied. "You made it public when you brought muscle into a neighborhood bar. Now you can leave on your own, or we can help you leave. Your choice." Chase looked around the room, saw nothing but hostile faces, and made the smart choice. He moved suddenly his head toward the door, and his friends followed him out. The bar erupted in cheers and backslapping. I found myself surrounded by men offering to buy me drinks and volunteering to help with whatever I needed. "Thanks, Harold," I said when things calmed down. "Don't mention it." "But Eli, this is escalating. That boy's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things." He was right, and I was about to make Chase even more desperate. The next morning, Jack Morrison called with his investigation results. "You were right about Devlin," he said. "The trust fund's almost empty. He owes money to 3 different dealers, his rent's 4 months behind, and his gallery's about to be evicted. But here's the interesting part. He's been getting financial help from someone." "Vivian?" "No, someone with a lot more money. Monthly deposits of $10,000 for the past 6 months. The payments are coming from an LLC called Hartwell Holdings." I knew that name. Hartwell was Vivian's maiden name. That's her father's company. Bingo. Looks like Daddy's been subsidizing his daughter's boy toy without knowing it. The payments are buried in the books as consulting fees. This was perfect. Vivian's father, Robert Hartwell, was old-school Connecticut money. He'd built his fortune in manufacturing and had very traditional ideas about marriage and family. If he found out his money was being used to support his daughter's affair, he cut her off completely. What about Skylar Morrison? Now that's where it gets interesting. She's been skimming money from her husband's business accounts. Small amounts, but consistent. About $50,000 over the past year. For what? Gambling, online poker mostly. She's got a serious problem and has been hiding it from her husband. I thanked Jack and hung up, my mind racing with possibilities. I had enough ammunition to destroy both Vivian and Skylar, but I needed to be strategic about how I used it. First, I called Robert Hartwell's office and made an appointment to see him. His secretary knew me from the work I'd done on his summer house, so she fit me in for that afternoon. Hartwell Industries occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Long Island Sound. Robert Hartwell's office was a monument to American capitalism. Mahogany paneling, oil paintings of ships and factories, and a desk the size of a small aircraft carrier. "Eli, good to see you," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "How's the restoration business?" "Can't complain. Mr. Hartwell, I need to talk to you about something sensitive. It concerns Vivian." His expression grew serious. "Sit down. What's going on?" I explained the situation as diplomatically as possible, focusing on the financial aspects rather than the personal betrayal. I showed him the bank records, proving that Hartwell Holdings had been making payments to Chase Devlin. His face went through several color changes as he reviewed the documents. "That little coward," he said finally. "And Vivian? God damn it, Eli, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I don't think she expected you to find out." "Well, she's about to learn that actions have consequences." He picked up his phone. "Margaret, get me legal on the line. I want to know how to stop payments to this Devlin character immediately." He hung up and looked at me with something like respect. "You know, I never thought you were good enough for my daughter. I was wrong. She wasn't good enough for you." That afternoon, Chase Devlin's financial lifeline was cut off. By evening, his landlord had served him with an eviction notice. By the next morning, his gallery was closed and his belongings were on the sidewalk. But I wasn't done yet. Skylar Morrison was about to learn that stealing from your husband to feed a gambling addiction was a very bad idea, especially when your husband was a prominent businessman with a reputation to protect. I made one phone call to James Morrison's office and requested a private meeting. I didn't tell him what it was about, just that it concerned his wife and required discretion. We met at his club, a stuffy old money institution, where men in expensive suits discussed business over single malt scotch and cigars. "What's this about, Granger?" Morrison asked. He was a cold fish, the kind of man who viewed everything in terms of profit and loss. I showed him Jack's investigation results, the bank records, the gambling accounts, the pattern of theft that had been going on for months. Morrison's face went white, then red, then white again. $50,000, he said quietly. "She stole $50,000 from me." "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you." "No, you're not. You're enjoying this." He looked at me with something like admiration. "You're destroying them one by one, aren't you?" "I'm just making sure the truth comes out." "Well, the truth is that my wife is a thief and a liar, and that's going to be very expensive for her." Morrison stood up and shook my hand. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll handle it from here." By the end of the week, Skylar Morrison was served with divorce papers and a lawsuit for the return of stolen funds. Her assets were frozen, her credit cards were canceled, and her social standing was in free fall. Chase was living in his car, and Vivian was about to discover that her safety net had disappeared. The war was far from over, but I was winning every battle. The call came at 6 a.m, Vivian crying hysterically. "Eli, please, we need to talk. I'm at the Starbucks on Main Street. Please come." I found her in a corner booth looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup was smeared, and her hands were shaking as she held her coffee cup. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "You've got 5 minutes. Daddy cut me off. Completely. He closed my trust fund, canceled my credit cards, everything." She wiped her eyes with a tissue. "He said you showed him some papers. I showed him where his money was going. Turns out he didn't appreciate funding your boyfriend's art career." "Chase is gone. He left town yesterday, didn't even say goodbye." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out you were right about him. He was just using me." "Shocking." "Skylar won't return my calls. Neither will Jade. I heard James is divorcing her." "Karma's an unpleasant person." She leaned forward, desperation in her eyes. "Eli, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. I'll be a better wife. I promise." I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. All I saw was panic and calculation. "You're not sorry you cheated, Vivian. You're sorry you got caught. You're not sorry you humiliated me in public. You're sorry it backfired. You're not sorry you tried to destroy my business and my reputation. You're sorry it didn't work." "That's not true." "It's completely true. 6 months ago, if Chase had been rich instead of broke, you'd have left me for him. The only reason you're here now is because your other options dried up." She started crying again, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sign the divorce papers, take what the law says you're entitled to, and disappear from my life." "And if I don't?" I leaned back in my chair. "Then I'll release the recordings of you and Skylar planning to destroy me. I'll make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of person you really are. I'll turn your life into a cautionary tale that parents tell their children." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when she realized she'd lost. "I never knew you could be so cruel," she said. "I learned from the best." I left her sitting there and drove to Ruth's office to finalize the divorce papers. But Vivian had one last card to play. That evening, I was working in my shop when I heard glass breaking. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to find my truck's windshield smashed and the word coward keyed into the driver's side door. This time, there were no photos, no witnesses, no evidence, just damage and rage. I was examining the vandalism when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Chase Devlin standing at the edge of my driveway holding a crowbar. "You destroyed my life," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "You destroyed your own life. I just helped it along. I lost everything because of you. My gallery, my apartment, my girlfriend. Your gallery was failing. Your apartment was being foreclosed on, and your girlfriend was married to someone else. I just accelerated the inevitable." He raised the crowbar. "I'm going to make you pay." "With what? You're broke, homeless, and about to be arrested for vandalism and attack. You think beating me up is going to improve your situation? I don't care anymore. I've got nothing left to lose." That's when I heard the sirens. 3 police cars pulled into my driveway, led by Officer Marks. They'd been patrolling the neighborhood after Mrs. Portis called in a suspicious person lurking around my property. Chase dropped the crowbar and tried to run, but he was surrounded. They found illegal substances in his pocket, cocaine, enough to qualify for dealing charges. As they loaded him into the back of a patrol car, he screamed at me through the window, "This isn't over!" But it was over. Chase was looking at serious jail time, and Vivian had finally run out of allies. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Vivian got exactly what Connecticut law required. Nothing more, nothing less. She moved back in with her parents, who made it clear she was welcome until she found a job and got her life together. The last I heard, she was working at a boutique in Hartford, selling overpriced clothes to women who looked down on her the same way she'd once looked down on others. Skylar Morrison's divorce was finalized a month later. She lost the house, the cars, and custody of her children. Her gambling addiction became public knowledge, and she was forced to enter rehab. Chase Devlin pled guilty to illegal substance possession and vandalism charges. He served 8 months in county jail and was ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my truck. As for me, I kept working, kept building, kept living my life. The scandal made me something of a local legend, the working-class guy who took on the rich kids and won. My business actually grew as a result, with clients who appreciated someone who wouldn't be intimidated by money or social status. 6 months after the divorce was final, I was having dinner at Murphy's Tavern when Margot Chen walked in. She'd divorced her husband, amicably, she told me, and moved back to town to be closer to her family. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "Please do." We talked for hours about everything except my ex-wife and her former friends. She was intelligent, funny, and refreshingly honest about her own mistakes and regrets. "I should have stood up to them years ago," she said. "I knew what they were doing was wrong, but I was afraid of being ostracized. It takes courage to do the right thing when everyone around you is doing the wrong thing." Is that what you were doing? The right thing? I thought about it for a moment. I was doing the necessary thing. Sometimes they're the same. We started seeing each other regularly. Nothing serious at first, just dinner and conversation with someone who understood the social dynamics of our small town, but wasn't interested in playing those games. One evening, about a year after my divorce, we were walking along the harbor when she asked me something I'd been wondering about myself. "Do you ever regret how it all played out? Do you ever wish you'd handled things differently?" I looked out at the water, thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the humiliation, the revenge, the aftermath. "No," I said finally. "I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. I regret wasting 5 years of my life on someone who saw me as a meal ticket rather than a partner. But I don't regret fighting back when they tried to destroy me. Even though it got ugly? Especially because it got ugly. They thought I'd just roll over and take it because I wasn't born with money or connections. They thought they could humiliate me in public and then ruin me in private. They were wrong." Margot smiled. "Good. Because I like this version of you better than the one who used to let Vivian walk all over him." That night, as I sat in my workshop with a beer and the satisfaction of a job well done, I thought about the toast that had started it all. I'd wanted to celebrate new beginnings and talk about the future. In a way, I'd gotten exactly what I'd asked for. I raised my beer to the empty room. "To new beginnings," I said aloud, "and to finally being done with people who mistake cruelty for sophistication." Outside, the harbor was quiet except for the sound of waves against the dock. Inside, I was at peace for the first time in years. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. But sometimes it's better served hot, fast, and in front of everyone who matters. Sometimes the villain really does win. And sometimes that's exactly what the story needs. I finished my beer, turned off the lights, and headed to bed, already looking forward to tomorrow and whatever new project it might bring. After all, I was in the business of building things, and I just finished my masterpiece.